I am Marwan Cameron, and this is The Conduit. All right, everyone, it is Wednesday, January 5th in Kitsap County. So glad that you are here joining us today. It is 36 degrees outside. Don't know if that's poultry. Poultry makes me think of chicken, but it's brisk out there, so stay warm, stay dry if you can. Super excited today. Let me go ahead and start off with the horn. We've got a new show this year, Tipping Points and Puzzle Pieces, with Resiliency Ecosystem's own founder and executive director, Mark Boatwright-Frost. How you doing there, Mark?
Doing well. How about you, Marwan?
Oh, man, I am blessed and highly favored. I'm excited to, continue to do this work with you into 22. So yeah, absolutely.
New year, new time.
Oh yeah, for sure. I mean, there's a lot to get into, a lot of things that we want to tackle and get folks involved. And yeah, just excited to do the work, really passionate. And, I'm glad we met and can find a way to build community so we get to model what it is that we want to see.
And I want to take a second to do the teaser that we've been talking about, is that we have a new project for the Kitsap Resiliency Project called Innovation for All. And we're going to be working on launching it, soft launch this month, hard launch in February. And it's going to be a very exciting time. People should be tuning in to find out what's happening. I think they're going to be very surprised.
All right. Yeah, stay tuned for that as we'll be rolling it out. If you've been watching the shows, you'll see sometimes when we do our commercials, you'll see food for all, water for all. And so here's Innovation for All. So do check out the website, www.reseco.org, for more information. I'll go ahead and type that in the chat so that you have it. And, Mark, I'm going to have you explain to the audience kind of what this show is about, as we start this thing off. Like, what was the purpose of this show, and what do we hope to, kind of glean from it?
Well, initially, I was thinking it was going to be limited discussions on certain topics around the Kitsap Resiliency Project. But as we have been exploring over the last several weeks and talking, it seems to me that it should become more of an innovation or an interactive process about how to engage people in the conversation. And as we go, I'm hoping that a lot of people will chime in and ask us questions that we would never have thought of, that we will learn more by answering.
Absolutely. All right. And it is going to take a community effort for sure, to make the change that we want to see. We talk about that all the time. It takes a village, all these things that we have. And we have to live it even more so. And I know a lot of folks will, as we speak, I think we need to be clear. We're not saying that you don't have community and you're not working together and you're not doing great things. Everyone is, but we need to be more intentional and come together and do a little bit more, right? If you're not collaborating with me and you're not collaborating with your neighbor, then, those are missed opportunities that we can grow from, right?
Yep.
And do better.
And here's a thought with that. I mean, we're all overwhelmed. We all have too much going on. I mean, our life on this planet is that way. But what if, and this is a big what if by connecting with other people, it lightens your load and you get to do more? I mean, there's a word called synergy that's all about that.
Well, and, shout out to Pastor Ellington. One of his phrases is many hands make light work.
Yep.
Which, exactly. I mean, that's a true story, right? And that happens when you've got a housing project that you need to do, and you invite your buddies over, and you give them beer and pizza, and you knock it out. And it's just like that with everything. And so we
Well,
need to do that with food and resources that are finite.
absolutely. I mean, I invite anybody who listens to us to go onto YouTube and type in Amish barn raising, and tell me if you can watch one of those happen and not feel really good at the end of it.
Amish barn racing.
Amish, everybody in the community comes together and raises the barn. It's a truly amazing thing to watch.
Oh, barn raising. I thought you said barn racing.
No, barn raising. Yeah, no, the whole community comes together, and it's like from nothing to a barn in like no time flat, because you've got like 200 people out there all working together to create this thing. And then when one of the other neighbors needs a barn raised, everybody shows up and does it. People bring food, people lay out tables, people are hammering, people are pulling on ropes. It's an amazing thing to watch.
I'll have to check that out. Now, so I wanted to ask you, Mark. We've got a question of the day, and
Okay.
what we're gonna do is I'm gonna put that in the chat. I'm gonna show you a series of videos, and then we'll get to kind of the question of the day. And the question of the day was,
For me, question of the day is, how do you build a community resilience movement?
oh, I thought it was the happiness.
Oh, happiness. Sorry. Okay. Yeah. Question today: how do you stay happy when everything's so negative? And before we start, I want to read something that I started this morning. It's the newest article I've got going on, and I was thinking about it for actually another video, but as you have pointed out to me on many occasions, I tend to overthink things.
Mm-mm.
But let me start here. It's called Coloring Inside the Lines. What has that ever gotten us? We are taught to color inside the lines. We can't step outside of the lines. We can't think outside the lines. So I kind of had a flash on Lewis Carroll and Alice in Wonderland and the famous poem of the walrus. And it's like, the time has come, the walrus said, to talk of many things, of shoes and ships and sealing wax, of cabbages and kings, and why the sea is boiling hot, and whether pigs have wings. And it seemed like a metaphor for what happens these days. We listen to media, we hear pundits talking on YouTube, we hear all of the stuff being pumped at us, and it's all about sealing wax and cabbages. And in the middle of all of that is, why is the sea boiling hot?
Mm.
So we hide things in the noise so that we don't have to really address it and talk about it. And another Lewis Carroll thought about this is, together we have gone down a rabbit hole that continues to get darker and deeper as we go. So together we need to climb back out into the light and find the light of our shared humanity. And those thoughts make me happy.
Those are the thoughts that make you happy.
Yep.
I have to think about what makes me happy. There's a few things, obviously Layla is the first thing that comes to mind.
Yep.
But more on a kind of a macro level or a societal level, what makes me happy, I'll ponder that, and I'll answer it during, when we do the question of the day. How do you stay happy with everything that is so negative?
By doing work. But we'll get to that answer in more depth later. Let's see what you got for me.
All right. So I'm going to go ahead and put this first link in there. Fair use. This is the nightly news, their full broadcast. The link is in the chat if you want to watch the entire broadcast. So let's go ahead and cue this first one up here.
I've been on the road for 27 hours, he tweeted this afternoon. Accidents and poor road conditions bringing a 50-mile stretch of I-95 outside of D.C. to a virtual halt. Tonight, crews unraveling the mess, but plenty more obstacles lie ahead. Tom Costello has late details.
An epic traffic disaster playing out over the last 36 hours in Virginia. Thousands of cars brought to a standstill by that massive storm dropping a foot of snow on the D.C. region, overwhelming road crews and trapping thousands of people. The elderly...
Now pause it from time. That was a foot of snow in a rapid amount of time. We didn't even get that, and it shut down Kitsap County.
Kids and pets in their cars. It started last night, a sea of static red taillights in freezing temps. By morning through most of the day, they barely budged. Overhead, NBC Washington's news chopper.
Some folks stuck in their vehicles overnight with little food or water.
And no restrooms. The affected highway, a 50-mile stretch of I-95 from Caroline County, Virginia to Dumfries. With few off-ramps, drivers had no escape, but even the side roads are clogged.
We have little kids and we're doing the best we can. But of course, there's other people who need assistance more than we do.
Among the thousands trapped for 20 hours or longer, the Sabon family driving from Boston to Florida, watching the sunrise at 7 a.m., the kids asleep in the backseat.
We got here about 9 o'clock last.
Now, the blessing for them was they were going on vacation, so they had all their luggage, so they could pull out the snacks and the food. But I don't typically have an emergency pack in my trunk in case something like this happens, and not for that long a period. You know, maybe you got your leftover, Starbucks coffee or your bottled water or whatever, but for 24 hours. And
actually, I do have an emergency bag in my car.
So it's one thing, definitely, if you do not have one, you have no idea what conditions you may find yourself in. Maybe you're driving and it's late at night and you go off on an embankment and you're down, some gully somewhere and you're waiting for help for hours. So it's good to have snacks and water and things. Just keep it in your trunk. I know sometimes, many of us want to keep our trunk nice and pristine. I'm kind of one of those, but keep it in there. You got to be prepared.
And it's not very expensive to have enough to keep you alive for 24 hours if you need to. I mean, you could do it for $20 or less.
So this is the first video that I wanted to show you, Mark, and we've got climate change is something that I see from this, right? Typically for us, my daughter was hoping for a white Christmas, and she got her wish. It started snowing on Christmas Eve, but we see our snow in February, March, if we get snow, and we got
up to this point.
Right.
There's no guarantee it's going to be continuing that way.
And then what state was that? Was that Denver or Colorado that was having the snow and the wildfire, the fire that happened?
Mm-hmm.
I mean, we're fighting multiple things at one time, and COVID, right? So they've got the trifecta there. So speak on this, if you would.
So first thing that you have to understand, and this is not going to be the happy moment, but the federal government has been the source of resources for many of the state and local sources. In Kitsap County, we're lucky because our first responders are funded predominantly by bonds that we always seem to pass. I mean, I could complain and say that it's hard to get a library bond through, but we almost always get the first responder bonds through. So we fund first responders, but we don't look at the big picture and the change, and there isn't enough resources in our shrinking resources assigned to this stuff over the last 3 or 4 decades to really address the problem. So it's on us to address, to make sure that we are safe, and to work with our communities to work together, which you always see happen in the time of a disaster. But don't you think we should be doing that beforehand, building those relationships?
Yeah.
You want to check the typing on that.
Oh,
what? No, never mind. I reread it. So, yeah. And if you have a body in your trunk, don't tell us. We don't want to know. But we tend to rely on the federal government, the state government, the local governments to address these issues. And as climate is changing, they don't have the resources. We haven't looked at it. They're predominantly reactive in a time that we really need to be proactive. So it's kind of on us to get together and have these conversations, and it's on us to come together and push for a proactive look of what's coming.
What does that entail? I know when we first met was for the 9/11 commemorative event that Martitha and Okuye were putting on, and that was a trigger for me to start making sure that I had emergency rations of food and water and other resources, and I actually gave that out as Christmas gifts to folks at G2. So, they got life straws and things of that nature, and making sure that grandma and mom, have, 3 gallons of water per day for each person in the house. And so that whipped me into action. And that was my trigger. Is that what people should be doing? What else can
It's one thing people should be doing. People should all, I mean, and every government agency will tell you this. You should have 2 weeks worth of food. You should have 2 weeks worth of water. You should have the ability to stay warm if the power goes out for a long period of time, extended period of time. I have an inside propane heater and a full canister of propane, tank of propane at all times. So when our electric heat goes out or the gas stops working or whatever, I have the ability to keep myself and my roommate and our animals warm. It's a way of thinking it through. But is that enough in times of climate change? Is that enough when we have storms that are disastrous, that create situations and flooding and tornadoes, as we've heard over the last year? These are not 100-year storms. They're not 10-year storms. They are now annual storms, and maybe even biannual storms. Is it enough for us to personally be prepared? If we're personally prepared, our family does better, and we have some resilience, and we have the ability to thrive a little bit. But as a neighborhood comes together, and you have the skills and the diversity of skills and ways of looking at things that you have in an entire neighborhood, they thrive more. So what we're really talking about is getting people to get together with their neighbors, and in your neighborhood, I'm almost guaranteed that there's going to be a medical professional of some sort, a doctor, a nurse, an EMT, somebody in your neighborhood is that person. Well, then make sure that they've got medical supplies to take care of there. Someone in your neighborhood is going to be a gardener, and you can work with them to create community gardens, or everybody help them with their garden to grow more food so the neighborhood has more food production a good chunk of the year. There are a lot of resources within there. There's going to be somebody who does logistics, who thinks about how things go together. There's going to be good communicators in your neighborhood. These are the people you want to get together and start having conversations and build relationships with, and maybe friendships, and have block parties and go back to the way things used to be 30, 40 years ago before we were all strangers.
That is very interesting. I know we're going to do it here on my block, come spring or summer. And I was raised where we didn't really talk to the neighbors, and so it was that's a hard one to kind of train yourself into a different kind of way of thinking. And so I do know some of my neighbors now, and we actually support my neighbors through, the organization. So, through food insecurity, there's some folks on our block that are experiencing that. So we provide food to them on Thursdays. And, my neighbor actually, shares my Wi-Fi because they can't afford it. So I just give it to them. And so they have access to it. And so those are some ways of building community, which is really helpful. And it helps for me to get to know my neighbors, and they'll keep a lookout when I'm gone. And, I've got an Amazon package and I'm not here. I'll get a text and say, hey, Mr. Cameron, your package is here, and we got it, and it's safe. And so that's the synergy that can take place there.
Absolutely. And, let's be honest, the government's not the only one that has fewer resources these days. Poverty is growing exponentially. And we could get into discussions about, the fact that the numbers we're being given represent virtually nothing. I mean, in the 70s, we went off the gold standard, which was that gold backed our dollars. At that point, it was told that we were told that our manufacturing capability was what kept our dollar valuable. So we went from a hard gold and gold standard for our dollar, meaning a dollar is worth $1 worth of gold, and it was stored as Fort Knox, to our ability to manufacture. Well, what happened in the 80s and 90s? Manufacturing offshored. So is it our manufacturing now that backs our dollar? Well, no. In the 80s and 90s, they said, it's our ability to do service. that backs our dollar. And then in the early 2000s, they started talking about GDP as opposed to what's backing our dollar. And if you start looking at the GDP, you start seeing that it is changing so that steak is no longer the measure, but hamburger is. Because people can afford to buy hamburger more than steak, so we measure how many people can buy hamburger, and they keep changing the numbers constantly to make it look like it's better than it is. In the meantime, millions of people have lost their jobs. Millions of people are not going back to work from COVID, and we can have a serious discussion and philosophize about why that is. But our economy isn't what it was. We don't have the resources we did. So people coming together in community and sharing resources, everybody does better. Yeah. Now, I know that's not the way that we like to look at it.
I don't know if it's not that we don't like to look at it. We just haven't. We've gotten away from it. We're in this microwave society and everything is so busy. You know what they say about giving people too many choices. If you have too many choices, then it's really no choice at all, right? It's really hard to decide. So, I mean, we're just so inundated and bombarded with everything that, it's hard to focus on the things that we need to focus on.
But it's also scarcity.
And scarcity. Yeah, well, that's fact.
And when you think about it, the people who are the billionaires, they're a billionaire and continuing to get more because they feel scarce. It's never enough to make them feel secure.
Mm-hmm.
And a person who has nothing actually, and sometimes feels more secure and less scarce than a billionaire does. Doesn't make it any more real, but the thing about scarcity is people have some are trying to hold on to it. And when you start talking about sharing with the community and everybody does better, the scarcity issue pops right up. And if I give it to them, I'll have less. So one of the things we want to address in this process of creating the grassroots movement around community resilience is, what is real security? What is real scarcity?
Mm-hmm.
Human resources are far more valuable in my mind than a dollar bill that might not be worth anything if a real disaster happens. I would much rather have somebody who's got medical experience that I've helped along the way and we work together in a community than a pile of money that would be worthless.
Gotcha.
Does it make sense?
Yeah, it does. And I think that kind of leads into the second video I wanted to show you. So let me go ahead and get that up. This is...
And I did not know what it is, so that was just happens.
Yeah, no. Yep, I'm showing these to Mark Cold and getting his response. This is from the same broadcast. So this is the Nightly News full broadcast. The link is there.
$1 million, all in the midst of that critical shortage of COVID tests. So what happened to the free at-home tests President Biden promised Americans would have by now? Our Peter Alexander has more from the White House.
Tonight, another COVID record setter. More than 1 million new infections reported nationwide in just 24 hours, though some of it likely due to a holiday backlog. Nearly 1 in 100 Americans now testing positive in just the last week. Hospitalizations up 41% in 2 weeks. President Biden tonight saying the unvaccinated are hardest hit.
There's no excuse. No excuse for anyone being unvaccinated.
It's a critical moment for the president, who came to office vowing to shut down the virus, but now faces an unprecedented COVID surge. The president under fire for not being prepared on testing. Last month, he promised free at-home tests for Americans starting now.
Rapid tests will start going out in the beginning of January because they're being produced now.
But today, the White House acknowledging it still has not finalized a contract with test manufacturers, nor unveiled its website to order tests. Meanwhile, President Biden's advising Americans to...
I've got more to play. I just want to, kind of break the video up and comment a little bit. And you're going to save your comments for the end, Mark. But this is, every Monday I have done an health segment at 1 p.m. And shout out to Kids at Public Health, as they have helped, to get the message out and give accurate data of what's happening locally and just giving us information. The thing is, I'm not a medical professional. I'm not a researcher. I'm not any of those things. But I can see the cause and effect of, you get a lot of people gathering around, centered around a holiday, and you're going to have this spike. And it seems they're so counterintuitive. I don't even know if it's counterintuitive. I don't know what they're doing. But it's like, all right, here comes, Thanksgiving. All right, let's loosen up all the, loosen up the world, let people travel, do everything. And then here comes the spike, and they know it. right? And then Omicron happens, what was that, like a few days after Thanksgiving in South Africa? They closed, travel down for those 8 countries in Africa. And it's eventually going to get here. It gets here. And then we've got higher levels of travel that are almost like pre-pandemic travel times, right? It's like, what are you guys doing? What the effect is going to be on the other side. And here we are with these hospitals being filled and everything else. And it's like, the CDC says, okay, well, you know what? You only need to quarantine for 5 days, and now you don't need a test. And now there's all this confusion, and they're going back and forth, and they don't seem to know what's happening. And again, I know that this is an ongoing developing thing, but some of this really seems like common sense. Let me go ahead and continue this.
Use Google.
I know this remains frustrating. Believe me, it's frustrating to me. But we're making improvements. COVID test near me on Google to find the nearest site where you can get a test.
But states.
All right, that's terrifying. When you have the president of the United States, the most powerful man in the world, right, is telling you to go to Google to get your resources. The federal government is telling you to Google it. The president, that's terrifying to me. It's one of the reasons why I wanted to show you this video.
Voting for help.
We do not have enough testing to go around. I don't think any state has enough testing to go around.
And massive testing lines remain from coast to coast.
You can't find an at-home rapid test in this area.
At least 21 states now reporting hospitalization records, and some healthcare centers are again overwhelmed and understaffed.
And so
Maryland declaring a state of emergency.
The next 4 to 6 weeks will be the most challenging time of the entire pandemic.
In Rhode Island.
I love the guy signing. The look on his face is priceless.
The thing that is so concerning to me is, this whole COVID thing has become so political. The thing that we could talk all day about that. What's not political is whether you have the vaccine or not, COVID people are filling up hospitals. So God forbid if you have an accident or you have a medical emergency and you can't get help, right? Record hospitalizations in 21 states. That's half the country. That's terrifying, especially if that's you. And there are lots of stories of people that are needing emergency services, not due to COVID, that can't get the help and have perished because there was no room.
2 medical centers calling COVID positive healthcare workers back to the job if they have mild symptoms. The impact growing on schools too.
The Chicago Teachers Union voting tonight.
So let me pause it there and have you jump in there, Mark.
Wow. So many things to say. And all right. So first of all, we have to talk about an elephant in the room. We are the only industrialized country in the world that does not have universal health care. The other elephant in the room is the belief that the federal government can move quickly on anything. I said earlier that they are predominantly reactive, not proactive, and this is a proactive situation. Kudos to Biden for trying to get it out, and I know exactly what happened. I don't even have to guess at this. He put it out, it went to the bureaucracy, and the bureaucracy screeched to a bloody halt. That's their job, is to slow things down so that tragedy doesn't happen because something happens too quickly. In this case, it's not a great thing, but it's the way that the government is designed, is to not create change. So people who think the government's going to change things are delusional, as far as I'm concerned, because historically it's never happened, or at least never proactively change things for the better. That's not their job. Their job is to create stability, and they do a good job of it. Not as good as we would like them to do, but they do a job of it. The second thing is, I'd like to talk a little bit about my point of view on why people aren't getting vaccinated. And I am fully vaccinated except for the booster, because the place that I go for the booster is very difficult to catch the right time at the right place. I intend to be fully vaccinated with booster this week. Our for-profit medical system, our political input on CDC, the way that the pharmaceutical company has influenced medicine significantly over the last 30, 40 years, to the point where we've had the opioid epidemic. You can't ignore all of the things that have happened in the name of profit. And it has created a trust issue with the American people. Within the Black population, there was the whole disaster, and you probably know more historically more than this, about the testing that was done on under vaccination that was a great detriment to the Black populace in the last century. There's a huge amount of distrust about that. There's a whole lot of reasons that people don't trust the pharmaceutical companies and our medical industry. We have lost the ability to be compassionate, and bedside manner is non-existent anymore. It's a shame. The saddest thing to me is there's good solid science saying about time frames that people should have vaccinations, especially around children. And we did all of that research before our daughter was born, and we knew that she should not be getting vaccinations, the vaccinations the hospital is giving, for 4 to 6 months after she's born. And they were pulling her out of our arms immediately, even when we said we didn't want them, and going to give them vaccinations and shots that weren't, science says, aren't appropriate until a certain age and time frame. And yet there we are. There's a whole lot of reasons not to trust the pharmaceutical industry. On the other hand, COVID is a different animal. It's not the same thing. Now, granted, the pharmaceutical companies are making bank from countries buying the vaccines, but COVID is a disease, and the best way to deal with the disease is to have a vaccination. It builds up the immunity you need. So when new variants come out, you aren't as damaged as you could have been without it. And we're seeing these numbers again and again and again. But you're dealing with fear. You're dealing with fear and distrust. And it doesn't help that politicians are throwing out there all kinds of nonsense, and we hold politicians to this belief that they have a better sense of understanding or more knowledge than we do, when they don't. Matter of fact, politicians are not often the smartest people on the planet. They're charismatic, but they're not terribly bright, and I know this because I've worked with a lot of them, and that's just the truth. And
let me ask you a question, Mark. We had Priya from the Kitsap Regional Library on yesterday, and one of the questions I asked her was, well, where do you go to get information that is not in the echo chamber, that has been vetted and verified, and that you can trust? So where does Mark go?
That's a simple answer. I go to the World Health Organization.
Okay.
I go to the UN. They've got the best epidemiologists and many of the best doctors in the world, and they come from a lot of not-for-profit medical industries that care about health, and so that's where I go to look. And granted that the CDC and the WHO are in lockstep on a lot of things, but there's some things they're not in lockstep on. However, I did get I mentioned that online a while back on the Kitsap Resiliency Project page on Facebook, and somebody came back to me saying that the World Health Organization and the United Nations is just an offshoot of the Italian mafia.
Whoa. Okay.
Yeah. I mean, and I just sit there staring at it for 10, 15 minutes and ended up deleting the comment because, it's there, but people will believe anything.
That's pretty crazy.
Yeah. So I guess in her eyes, I'm getting my information from the Sicilian mafia, but actually I'm going to the World Health Organization and reading their documentation because they have a lot of good resources and a lot of good science, and they explain it very clearly.
And it's not that I know that the WHO has had some missteps also. Put out.
But again, missteps are not missteps are going to happen when you have a national or an international emergency, a worldwide emergency like a pandemic.
Yeah, for sure. It was, I think, right before New Year's, and in New York, the president and the local government they were so excited. They had 10,000 testing kits that they were handing out on the street. And that seems so inefficient. It's like you got 8 million people in New York City, probably more, and you're handing out 10,000 kits. Like, you might as well not hand out any kits at that point. And then my thought is, you know, if it's, and what they're saying is this: we want to make sure that every residence has a testing kit, one testing kit, right? So I'm like, well, the U.S. Postal Service is part of the government. Why not just mail them instead of handing them out in the streets? It's like, I don't understand how they come up with their logic.
We can mail stimulus checks. Why not mail testing kits?
Just mail them. You can track what houses they went to, and you know, I just, you know, and then they've got the data with the tracker for those that have signed up that are, you know, tracking whether or not they've had COVID. So, you know, if there are people that are more susceptible and they're using the daily tracker, okay, maybe you can prioritize those people first.
Yeah,
you know,
I'm ashamed to say that I turned mine off because it was sending me too many messages that said nothing.
I mean, I don't understand who is making these decisions. It just, to me, it's unfathomable.
Yeah, and in the whole health thing is so screwed up. And
the critique is fair, right? Yeah. I mean, they have had 2 years to work on this, and pretty much in a blank check. So, you know, please check out the full nightly news, full broadcast if you want to see all of it. We're not going to play it all here. Now, there's one last video that I wanted to play for you and get your reaction from. This one is probably
one thing I wanted to say before we close the subject out is for those folks who don't have health insurance, who can't afford to get vaccinated, who are afraid of a cost for it, go to the Peninsula Community Health Services at Gateway Center, and they will get you taken care of. Okay? It makes it easy.
Yeah, absolutely. And is that where you got yours at?
That's where I did go to get mine, is PCHS, and I will tell you, the people giving the shots are really good at it. Almost didn't even know the needle went in.
You know, that brings another question. I had watched some, and we don't have to get too much into it if you don't have the answer on this. But there's a gentleman in the UK, I believe, that I watch pretty often, and seems very reputable. Was a doctor, and he just kind of goes over the information that is put out by the WHO and in the CDC in a very logical way, and so I appreciate that. But one of the challenges that I've heard is people being injected in the wrong way. Have you heard anything about that? Where they're supposed to somehow
it's intermuscular. It's hard to do it the wrong way.
And that's interesting. I'll try to get some information and share it with you, but it's like, you know, again, it's consuming all of this information, so you got to be careful what you're listening to. So that's why I didn't want to get into it too much, but there are a lot of unknowns, right?
Yeah, it is, and social media doesn't generally help you, and it takes an enormous amount of discipline to keep your social media pages clean enough to get real information. I spend a half an hour to 45 minutes a day doing it.
How long?
A half an hour to 45 minutes a day.
Wow. All right. Well, let's play this last video here. This is BGS Ibmore. Again, good channel to check out. This isn't so much for news information. He covers a lot of different things. But I thought this particular article that he's speaking about is very illuminating and not in a good way.
Huh. I'd like to see the source material. Yeah, whenever I see something that says life insurance CEO or X person says, I immediately go, okay, I want source material. I want to know what I want to know what they're pulling from. I want to see the data. X person says, I immediately go, okay, I want source material. I want to know what I want to know what they're pulling from. I want to see the data. Or X person says, I immediately go, okay, I want source material. Okay, I'm hearing myself again and again.
Yeah, no, I'm turning it up. I can't hear the video.
Oh, okay.
On the show, so
I can't either.
So basically, what they're saying is, the death rate for those aged 18 to 64 has risen an astonishingly 40% over pre-pandemic levels, and this is according to the CEO of the Indianapolis-based insurance company, One America. Now, of course, they're the ones that are paying out these insurance claims, and so this is really concerning. I'm going to go ahead and put this in the chat. I'm not sure why exactly this isn't playing, especially since the other one should played, but life expectancy has been decreased for all races across the board. And I think that kind of goes to our question of the day about happiness, right? I mean, there's lots of reasons why let me go ahead and put our question of the day up. How do you stay happy with everything that is so negative? But with COVID, with, cancer, healthcare things, with depression, there's so many different reasons on why life expectancy can decrease and not increase, as though, even though we're innovative with our technology and medical, help and technologies and everything else. So, yeah, I know you wanted to check the source out on that. I will try to look for the article and put it in the chat so you can kind of trace that back while you give me your thoughts on just the levels. Let's assume this information is true and just give me your thought on that.
So, well,
with that caveat.
Yeah, no, I'm there's so many ways to say this. I know that everything's a mess. And that's how I'm going to address this. I know everything's a mess. We all, on some level, know everything's a mess. What we don't know is what to do about it. And most of us can't even pay attention to that it's a mess, even though we know it. We live in fear. We have that in our guts all the time that, I'm one paycheck away from being homeless. We just went through a snowstorm. I didn't do what I needed to do beforehand. I don't have enough water. I don't have enough. Oh my God, I don't have enough toilet paper. Interesting thing is I went to Costco Tuesday. Today's Wednesday. I went to Costco Monday. And I was looking around at what people were buying now. I went to Costco because I get my eggs at Costco. I get half and half, basic grocery stuff at Costco. And during the snowstorm, I wasn't particularly stretched. I have plenty of food in the house because I always have 2 weeks worth of food in the house. Fresh produce was getting a little close, and I wanted to get some Brussels sprouts and things like that. But when I was there, people were buying up all the water. They were buying up toilet paper. I'm going, wait, the disaster was last week. But you're stocking up now. There's a whole mentality around that just puzzles me. But I understand it's fear reaction. We all live in fear, and we don't have time to think about we don't give ourselves the time or the breath to think about it, and we feel we're all alone. So how do I stay happy during this? I work to build relationships. I work every day to find solutions for these problems, starting with myself, my family, my community, Marwan's community, the larger Kitsap community. If we come together, we can solve anything. It's like the title of this, Tipping Points and Puzzle Pieces. We look at this as a giant jigsaw puzzle, and resilient ecosystems is all about putting the edges on the puzzle. But we can't finish the puzzle ourselves, and nobody can. There's no politician, there's no savior, there's no anything that's going to be able to finish the puzzle if you don't show up with your piece. We can't know what the future is going to look like until you show up, whoever you are, with a piece of the puzzle. You're going to come thinking you don't know anything and you don't have a piece of the puzzle, but you'll ask a question that will make us rethink things. You will have a way of looking at things that is different, that helps us figure something out. Or you'll have some input that makes it better, because The future is about all of us. And if all of us don't bring our pieces, we aren't going to know what the future looks like. It will be like it is now and continually to get worse. There's a word, entropy, and entropy is a decline. A decline, and we just watch things erode. The energy comes out of it; it just erodes and dies. And we are in an entropy state right now. We have to change the state to a positive energy state. And I don't mean to sound spiritual or anything, but energy transfers in more physical, in more of a physics basis now. We need to put our energy toward creating a different outcome. And we can only do that together. And it doesn't matter what the problem is, together we can solve it. I mean, granted, okay, a nuclear bomb can drop on Bangor or PSNS, and well, the problem's solved one way or the other for all of us. We won't be here. But anything else other than that, we can't stop the climate change. We cannot stop the storms. We cannot stop these things happening. But our choice of how we deal with them is entirely on us, and we can do that together. And in the process, mitigate some of the worst things that can happen to us. Marwan and I and Pastor Ellington were talking about what's in it for you. What's in it for you is a better life. What does that look like? Well, bring your piece of the puzzle and we'll know. What makes me happy? Doing this work every day. It also makes it less scary for me because I'm looking at it face on and knowing that there's a solution.
Maslow's hierarchy, those basic needs of food, shelter, water, and as you kind of move up to self-actualization, you want to stay in those higher levels and not have to worry about, the basics. And we see more and more people, and not only nationally, but locally, that don't have the very basics of needs, right? I mean, yep. We were activated,
growing all the time.
Right. I mean, for those of you that don't know, that may be checking in for the first time, my organization, G2, provides transportation. And when the snowstorm hit, starting Christmas Eve up until, the severe weather shelter opened last night, we are transporting people to severe winter shelters, right? I mean, we were talking about getting down into the teens and the 20s. And I shouldn't even have to say that because 37 degrees isn't anything that anyone should be sleeping outside for, right? It is still cold. This is still inhumane, right? No one should be outside who doesn't want to be outside. Again, richest nation in the history of mankind, and we have people that are homeless and people that are hungry, and we have all these issues, and it just shouldn't exist, right? But it does, unfortunately, and these numbers are growing. We didn't transport near as many people last year as we did in just this 1 week stretch. And so we're seeing these numbers growing, right? We had an organization, shout out to Bailey, that was bringing up an 18-wheeler every Thursday and handing out food. And people, the parking lot was full of people getting their trunk filled with groceries every Thursday, right? And you are seeing, folks that never needed help that are needing help, and they're coming in and they're coming and getting the food, and all the efforts of all the organizations that are pulling together. You'd be surprised to know how many nonprofits operate just inside Kitsap County. It's a lot, right? I think it's probably more than 100. If you look at the Kitsap Great Give, I think it's like 300, if I'm not mistaken. Don't quote me on that. And that's not enough, right? And as Mark was saying, the resources are finite. One, from the federal government, but two, locally, churches are strained. They don't have the money to, put a family up in a hotel the way they used to do, multiple families, or fill up gas tanks or provide services in those ways. So everyone is tapped and stressed out.
And the problem continues to grow.
Yeah, absolutely. Absolutely. And so, we see it. We are definitely boots on the ground. And that's why, this is important to me, to really work on, not only being a silo buster, but finding different ways to collaborate together so that we can do more and not only provide those the things that are missing from those that need it the most, but making sure that more of us don't slip into that category. I mean, if you look at a lot of the new structures in Kitsap County, they're storage. It's storage because people are downsizing. They can't afford where they were living. And so they've got to downsize, and they go from a large home to a house. They go from a house to a friend's house. They go to the friend's house to the car to the street. And, sometimes they bypass that. Rob says in the chat, we are seeing this problem grow in all aspects, and there seems to be no end in sight. And Stephanie says, answer, take the time to look at what you have, then take the time to share what you can, whether that is a resource or time, but give of yourself, and then watch the smiles, happiness you bring to others.
So, here's a good entry point going back to the Kitsap Resiliency Project, building neighborhoods that work together and changing the mindset across the county to one from scarcity to one of sharing and community. I was asked yesterday, what do I mean by community? And I said, it's about neighbors being together, working together, to learning how to share and grow food together. I mean, I drive by Blueberry a couple times a week, and I'm always amazed, and I wish there were like 100 blueberries.
What's Blueberry?
Oh, sorry. Blueberry is a community garden where on Sylvan Way, between Wheaton or 303 and the next road out from there.
Okay, I needed you to define that because blueberry means something very different to me and Layla. That is the Froyo in Silverdale, so that's our favorite place. I was like,
it's Blueberry Park, and people go there and do community gardening during the year. You'll see like 40 people there growing food. And I think that they should be on everywhere you can have them, is have community gardens so people can come together and grow food. We've talked a lot about Kitsap County, and we've talked a lot about things that are going on. But part of the reason that we have a Food for All project in Kitsap County is because in a previous life I was executive director of the Clean Technology Trade Alliance. And a humanitarian group out of Mexico called IHS came to us and said that in the state of Chihuahua, they have lost 80% of their agriculture over the last 2 decades due to desertification, which is climate change. So they had an outmigration from the Copper Canyon, which is where the predominant agriculture was. It's about 200 miles south of the border, to Juarez, of over 100,000 people who could no longer make a living or feed themselves doing agriculture. And this challenged us to see if we can put together a technology or a group of technologies to replace the agriculture and minimize the effect of the changing environments on it and maximize the efficiency of water use. And we did. And that's what we're bringing to the table for the Food for All project. But that's not enough. We can create 1,000 jobs in Kitsap County and entire industry selling to Costco, who's already looking to have its supply chains more secure. Walmart doing the same thing. Kroger's probably is as well. There are a lot of people that know that this problem of food shortages is growing, and we are going to have to grow locally in order to make sure that we have food on the table. If the disaster happened in Kitsap County, we have 3 days worth of food. That's it. And we have, 300,000 people here. That's not a pretty picture. So in order to secure the ability, and we've already started seeing shelves being empty. We're starting to see, prices of meat go from $1.99 a pound to $4.99 a pound. This is happening right now in our lives. If it got worse, because COVID plus whatever other natural disaster happens, it could be life or death for a bunch of people in this county. So creating grow centers here where we can grow our own food and supply our own food, that is a huge thing. and create jobs. Well, we have. Some people ask what resilient communities thrive. What do you mean? I said the more resilient you are, the more resources and capacity you have.
Mm-hmm.
And we can create jobs. We can create food. We can create food security. We can provide a portion of that food to food banks and to missions to feed homeless people. But we have to change our thinking to thinking of a community as opposed to thinking of a person. It isn't about what we have that creates security individually. It's about what we have together that is really about security.
You know, and I think the thing that is overlooked a lot, you know, because you said, you know, well, we'll have food to feed people that are experiencing homelessness. You know, it's so many more people that are experiencing food insecurity. We know because we deliver to them a hot meal every single Thursday. These aren't people that are homeless. These are people that are, you know,
unable to buy food.
Right.
And food stamps is at an all-time high in this country. More people have food stamps now than have ever had them in the past. Food banks are completely overwhelmed.
Many of your professors at Olympic College on
have
food
stamps. Yep, and a lot of enlisted military are also on food stamps because they need the money to survive. Costs are going up. That's what inflation's all about.
But it's hidden. We don't see that.
It's hidden. Yeah. Well, it's not hidden at the grocery store when you go in and you're paying twice as much as you were like a month ago or 6 months ago.
Right. But what I mean by it's hidden is that, again, people are so busy and they complain about, you know, okay, a pack of bacon. I don't do much grocery shopping, but when I do, I drink Dos Equis. But when I do go in, and I see the prices, I actually took pictures and I'm like, good God, man, it's like I hadn't been in a grocery store in a decade. You know how people will say, hey, I remember when, you know, this was $1, and I remember when that was how I felt. And it was like, it's only been like 2 months since I've been in a grocery store. Like, this is crazy. But you don't see the other factors around that is the catalyst to that. And that so many of us will hide our suffering for so many different reasons, right? I mean, it could be pride, you know, how you're going to look, you know, to your friends and your family. And so many people are in that. So if food stamps are at an all-time high as far as SNAP benefits and who's using them, but you don't know who it is, well, it can't be all homeless folks, right?
No,
it can't be everyone experiencing homelessness.
So as we're running out of time on this, I do want to bring up two things. Is it the stigma about homeless people? Okay, in the 80s, the sitting president Reagan closed mental hospitals and created the initial seed of what homelessness is in this country today. But that's no longer the case. We don't have people from mental institutions solely on the streets. We had a mortgage debacle where hundreds of thousands of people lost their homes, and that created growing homelessness. We have an economy that's collapsing that they're trying to tell us isn't, and we have homeless people on the street. These are people who are like you and I and are just one paycheck away from being homeless. Mm-hmm. So the stigma about them being mentally ill drug users is a lot of horse shit. Excuse me, I don't know if I can say that on air, but it's essentially to keep you looking at them with disdain. But we're all in this together. We're all hurting by it. It's time to sit down and talk. It's time for all of us to come together and find solutions, because I guarantee you have a piece of the puzzle. I guarantee it. You just don't know you do yet. But if you don't show up, we'll never know what the picture is going to look like. Or the picture will look like something that you don't want it to. You have a voice, use it.
That's 100% facts. I got to tell you, this is one of the fastest hours from a podcast. There's so much more that we can talk about, but that's good, because that means that next week we're going to continue the conversation.
We are.
So this is Tipping Points and Puzzle Pieces with Mark. Mark, you know, thank you for coming on and wanting to create a space so that people can learn. And hopefully we will continue to create community. and folks will continue to gather together and grow together. Is that punny?
It's punishment.
Hey, dad jokes.
There.
Dad jokes. I'll be here all day. It is what it is. But I appreciate you. I hope that you will check out the website, www.reseco.org. Also, you can catch them on Facebook. Mark, you want to give those out?
Yeah, Facebook is the Kitsap Resiliency Project. If you like that, you can request to become part of Resiliency Rocks, which is where all the really fun stuff happens. But I also wanted to say, going back to the Innovation for All, there is a major web update coming the middle of this month. I'm working on it steadily right now, and it's pretty bloody amazing. I don't want to pitch it too hard at the moment, but there's some really cool stuff coming, and I think you guys will really like it. So stay tuned.
Well, we will see you at 12 p.m. next Wednesday. For Mark, I'm Marwan. This is The Conduit. We'll see you next time.